You're listening to Game and Chat, where we level up with conversations about gaming then and now. I'm your host, Daniel, aka One to Switcheroo. So let's press start and game on. Welcome everyone to another episode of Game and Chat, streamed directly to your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, or all of the above to support the cause. And with that being said, episode 14 is here, people. Welcome back and happy holidays. Christmas is approaching very, very fast. A little too fast for my liking. I really love this. This is my favorite time of the year. This fall, winter. It's always going to be amazing for me and very relaxing. I don't want it to end. I wish it was like that all year. But anyway, we are here with the holiday spirit surrounding us. And we're here to talk about one of my favorite games ever made. One of the games that really revolutionized the industry specifically for how it was done on a single handheld device. And how this really is the perfect example of pushing the limits and exceeding expectations, even with the hardware limitations at the time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the amazing Generation 2 of Pokemon games, Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal. It is a very milestone anniversary. It's the 24th anniversary since Pokemon Gold and Silver came out in the 2000, and we cannot believe it's already been this long. And how up until this day, with yes, technically better Pokemon games, better mechanics, better quality of life improvements that they made throughout the years with newer generations, but I don't think any of these follow-up games have touched the level of dedication and surprise and nostalgic, I would say, even that Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal did for us gamers back in the 2000s when we were playing with our Game Boy Colors and discovering this whole new town, this whole new region with new Pokemons, new evolutions from favorite ones that we have from Generation 1, and for what is, for me, the most surprising feature and most surprise in any game ever, the fact that you only get one but two regions in one game. So we're going to talk about this today, guys. This is a very special one. Of course, you guys know the whole story about my Game Boy Color line that got missing and Pokemon Gold was on it and Crystal, and I was devastated when that happened. But all I knew is that this game was my everything when I was a kid, and it's time for us to share our best experiences about it. But before we get started, you guys know what it comes next. Thank you so much, everybody who has listened to the episode so far. Our Sonic episode did actually really, really well. So I want to thank everybody, especially the Sonic fans out there. I'm sure you guys are having a blast right now, and a huge shout out to all of you for making this episode very special. And a huge shout out to Sebastian, aka Sounds by Sebas, for joining me on that episode, who made it even more special. And of course, since we're on the Sonic topic, we need to talk about what we've been playing this past couple weeks. So in my case, people, I've been actually, unrelated. We watched the Sonic movie. It was amazing. Go watch it, please. It's like whatever Sonic fan has asked for and more. And I'm a Sonic fan, but I'm not a diehard Sonic fan per se. So if you're a diehard Sonic fan, you are in for a treat. So please go see the movie. It is amazing. And for games that I've been playing, still working on my Mario and Luigi Brothership. Because of the Sonic movie, I actually reconnected a little bit with Sonic Frontier, so I'm replaying that a little bit more often. And yeah, just jumping on up and down on different games. I started off Indiana Jones. I think the game seems amazing so far. So good reason to turn on my Xbox after a while. So I'm checking that out. So anyway, hopping in and out all over the place. I'm sure you guys are too, as we are getting ready to the reveal of the Nintendo Switch successor, potentially in January, very likely in January. So, we had a lot of backup to do and try to like catch up as much as we can before that releases. But anyway, guys, welcome again, and let's get this show on the road. Welcome to episode 14 on Game and Chat, Generation 2, the Golden Era Pokemon. And of course, as always, we reminisce on how these games came to be. And with the same thing, of course, this was a very high expectation because, of course, it was the sequel for what it was the first Pokemon games in the Game Boy era, being Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green. As the first game and how they made a huge splash and a huge hit amongst us gamers, and how they were able to come up with a sequel to it by not only retaining the charm and the innovation that the first game did, but actually pushing the limits, like I said before, and going above and beyond. And I think this game is the perfect example on going above and beyond the expectation when it comes down to a sequel. And there's no, like I said, there's just no better example than this. Every time I look back at this game and I remember everything that came with it, and then the surprises that came after beating it, it was just like, and this is me being 11 years old, hence to say, it was just amazing. Because not only you are bringing up the new stuff from the game, but you're carrying the old stuff back with you that were great. And you made something like out of this world. And again, this game came out in the 2000s, so we know technology, especially because this was done on a Game Boy. Fun fact, by the way, the fact that we got 2 regions in one cartridge is not coincidence. And the game was going to release with Johto only. It wasn't until the amazingly talented and gifted Mr. Satoru Iwata stepped in, and I don't know what kind of wizardry he did, but he was able to optimize the game, not only to have Johto render in color for the first time and for the Game Boy Color, but also to include Kanto as a region that you would access after beating the Elite Four. And you got double the content and double the gaming in a Game Boy, which is crazy to think that this man was able to pull this off on a Game Boy device. You would think that this is something that couldn't be done on the 64, but there aren't even games on the Nintendo 64 that are this expensive that Pokemon Gold was. And that is something that I cannot be understated, and it's one of the things that Satoru Iwata is loved and admired for up until this day, a few years past of his passing, unfortunately. And the product is right there. We got a fresh new region, about over 100 new monsters to catch on. Like I said, fan favorite mons from the first generation that got evolution and got a really good treatment. And then revisiting Kanto after so many years of playing the previous games, and see how things change and how some things remain the same. It was just magical. And this is how was like a really big expansion, and this is how the Pokemon games will turn out to be really big going forward, and how this game actually fully embraced the color graphics as coming from the Game Boy, especially for those that have the big Game Boy with the green screen, the very first Game Boy, that it was just hard to see sometimes, and you couldn't tell difference of the things. The fact that this was brought into color give it like a new sense of immersion and replayability that you didn't see in any other games before. And again, Pokemon Company, Game Freak, and Nintendo just pull out this out of their sleeve that I still cannot believe that it was done like that. And of course, this is what's going to be successful as Red and Blue. I don't think it's as successful. I think still Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow are still the best-selling games, right behind Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I think they took over the place, and Pokemon Sword and Shield also took over before those came out. But anyway, when it comes down to all Pokemon games, this is my go-to, and and it's because the fact that this was the first of so many features that today they are essential in any Pokemon game. And even to this day, sometimes for like more advanced games, they had to step away and sacrifice to improve quality of the games, which I totally understand. But it's very hard to go back and for example, Pokemon, to put an example, Pokemon Gold and Silver and Crystal, they introduced the day-night cycle, and the fact that Pokemon Sapphire and Ruby and Emerald didn't have a day-night cycle was kind of like mind-blowing for me. They introduced weather, but dynamic weather, but still, I feel like the day and night cycle really made a difference, especially because, on the day, you can catch a certain type of Pokemon, on the night, other Pokemon will appear, so it added that sense of replayability, especially that it was based on real time too, so it was kind of make you feel like engaged at any time of the day. Yeah, today by normal conventions might seem a little inconvenient. It's like, oh my god, I have to wait until 7 p.m. to go catch a Hoot, for example. But the fact that they introduced this, it gives like a sense of like mixed reality. I don't know if this is the right way to describe it, but it really was awesome that when it was the morning, it was morning, and when it was night, it was night. And you will have to play in certain times of the day to get you. So that was very smart for them too, because it makes us keeping going back into the game to do these different tasks on a different like time of the day, because that's the only way you can do that. So a lot of innovations, and again, amazing that this was done on a Game Boy when the Nintendo 64 could be struggling just to run Ocarina of Time at 20 frames per second. But it's just and I remember this cheerily. I told this story already, and I already mentioned it briefly, like how this was one of the first games I got with my Game Boy Color back in the day, along with a bootleg copy of Zelda Oracle of Seasons, funny enough. But I just remember just going with my neighbor. My neighbor had silver, I had gold, so it was fun how we just come back from school, or even during school, like sneaking in between classes just with the cable link and try to trade Pokemon and like battling and all that. So it's just the interactability, and how we share like cool stuff that we did. Oh yeah, you got to Kanto. Oh, it turns out that you can fight Red in the end, things like that. Oh, spoiler alert, by the way. I mean, it's only been 24 years, but anyway, these games are just always remembered, and especially because they improve so much upon things that were talked about, the rendering in color, but also the music. I think was a step up in the right direction, because we were limited to a few tracks in the previous games for pretty much everything, and then this one like took it up a notch a little bit and added a little bit of not exactly dynamic music, but like almost every town had like a different soundtrack. Not all of them, but they really stepped it up. I feel like the MIDI instruments actually got improved on since Generation 1. So a lot of things that make this game special, and this is also like a good follow-up to like how we discussed on previous episodes of like bringing something new but retaining something old, familiarity, but also bringing a breath of fresh air. I think this is what it did. And honestly, I don't think we had this kind of sense of something new and familiarity all the way up to Pokemon Legends Arceus. And Pokemon Legends Arceus is quote-unquote not a mainline game, very quote-unquote. It's about to become its own thing now with the release of the sequel next year. But I don't know, I can just go on about these games, and I feel like the fact that we got this at all was just a blessing, and it really shake up the Game Boy Color sales and made them one of the more successful handhelds ever made. But now let's talk about the actual region itself. I feel like let's focus a little bit on Johto as the region. And fun fact, I discovered that there was like another region and basically another game, because of course I was back in my country, so game accessibility was a little bit difficult, especially because of the currency exchange was a little more expensive to get. But I actually found out there was like a new generation of Pokemon. Because fun fact, I remember one episode where Misty gets Togepi for the first time, and then I'm looking at the Pokemon list of the 150. That's not there. Like, what's this? Like, what's going on here? And it was one of the first Pokemon introduced for Generation 2, besides Dumpin, I think, in the first movie. I think it was one of the first one, and Meryl. But that's when I found out, I was like, wait, there's more to this? Like, what am I missing out? And then I think I didn't get the game at launch. I think I got it like maybe in 2001, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe, I don't know. Just trying to jack my memory a little bit. But just knowing that there was going to be like a whole new thing was very exciting for me. And then eventually when I end up getting the Game Boy for Christmas and Pokemon Gold with it, and the other game, Zelda, it was just very exciting. And what I do remember is just turning on that Game Boy and playing for at least 2 hours before I eventually fall asleep, because I was a kid. couldn't stay up for too long, But it's just the excitement of it, discovering like the new towns, the routes, and all the new Pokemon. I believe the first Pokemon that I catch was a Hood. And then, oh yeah, this is so cool. And then Pidgey came out, and then you said catch Pidgey and ditch the Hood right away. Because I like Pidgey. The Pidgey line, I think, is still really cool. I'm glad to see that back there. When it comes down to starters, I'm a Totodile guy. I mean, that little dude, especially how I met him in the anime, and it was exactly how I imagined. They say very happy and like jumping, moving their legs, and it was just really cool, little gator guy. Chikorita, she was okay. I mean, could be both, but they were okay, and I feel like it was a little bit of a downgrade from Bulbasaur, in my opinion, especially because they didn't have a second typing. So picking up Chikorita, I mean, the first two gyms are gonna wreck you because it's both of your weaknesses. So it would have been a bad time. And Cyndaquil is my second favorite. I feel like Cyndaquil didn't stand out as much as Charmander did on Generation 1, but I feel like every run I played about this game, it was Totodile. I'll get Totodile first, and I'll find the other two eventually by trading or whatever. But Totodile was my guy. And then when he evolved all the way into Feraligatr in the end, it was just really cool to see this big crocodile water-like Pokemon just to take over. And how powerful it was in the day, because Feraligatr actually took me out of trouble. And this is me, of course, without having any idea other than like type matching and other features here and there. But it really, really made my life a little easier than the other two did when I tried to do a run with them. And just exploring Johto itself, it's kind of like a sort of mirror, quote unquote, of Kanto. And we have, of course, where everything starts in Neobark Town. I mean, this is, the hometown and like how you get your Pokemon for the first time. Although they changed the thing a little bit because we get the introduction eventually after doing a couple attacks to Silver, which is, okay, our rival. I mean, Silver because I had Pokemon Gold. It might be Gold for those who got Silver. The guy with the red hair, you guys know who I'm talking about. And he just like straight up like just steal the Pokemon from Professor Birch. And it just got along with it. But, all the towns here actually look a little bit more fleshed out. They have a little more personality. The greens that you can see around give you a little bit more like natural, whether on the previous Pokemon games it was just like a town, you can only see houses. I feel like the inclusion of like more like greenery around feel like a little bit more natural, quote unquote. I mean, it's hard to say these things when you're looking at the sprites and it's just like a sprite, but you guys know what I mean. It's the sense of immersion, people. Like they were trying really hard to try to make you feel like you were inside the game on a 8-bit device. So I feel they did a really good job with that. And again, shout out to putting color into the games to make this more livable. I say my favorite town of all of them, I want to say Goldenrod City was actually really, really cool to see. It's one of the biggest town in the game. It's basically mirror to what's it called? The one with Sabrina on it on Kanto. Saffron City with Sabrina and the March. I would call it March City because that's the name of the badge. And which, funny enough, I mean, it connects. Like they have the railroad that connects from Goldenrod City to Saffron City, and that's how you move from Johto to Kanto eventually after you do a couple things in the game. I like Goldenrod because, like I said, it's big. The department store is there. The radio station is there. So a lot of the things happen. A lot of the key moments happen in Goldenrod City. So I think it's really cool to see. And also, we cannot forget that it's very close to the national park, which for me has like the best soundtrack in the entire game. We'll get into the music in a little bit. But other than that, I think I also like Olivine City, just because it was my introduction to Jasmine, and it's when I saw Steelix for the first time, and I was freaking out because how cool that Iron Snake Onyx evolution was. But yeah, I mean, overall the towns here are very they're very well put together. They feel a little smaller, some of them, but at the same time bigger than the ones in Kanto. So it's really, really cool that they took this approach on that regards. And of course, you know, we're not going to talk about the Johto cities and Pokemon. We'll also mention the gym leaders. And, you know, this is very nice because they took some of the gym leaders of other typings that they weren't in the previous game. So I like that they incorporated in that. You know, starting right away with the first gym, which is Faulkner on Violet City, which is already was a flying type. And then you follow up with Buxy on Gym 2 with Azalea Town. And like I said, if you choose Chikorita as your starter, this is going to be a bad time. I'll tell you that right away. If you choose Cyndaquil or Totodile, though, it's more manageable for Sword. But I'm sure no matter who you pick, and you know, out of all the gym leaders that we face, we need to talk about the trauma. We need to talk about the trauma on Goldenrod City, by the way, and that is freaking Whitney and her freaking milk tank. I feel like this is one of the most traumatic experiences for children in any game, myself included, because I mean, I don't think I struggle in any other gym. I don't think I think I actually beat up every gym the first time except for this one. I remember getting in there and just dealing with this Miltank and his freaking rollout and attract, because I used to go by male Pokemon, so her Miltank was female, of course, and she will use attract and then she will roll out the hell of all of my Pokemon. I don't know. I definitely didn't beat her in the same day. I don't know how many days it took. It's been a while since I remember, but I think I ended up having to go catch a Machop and then go back and beat her because it was a nightmare. A nightmare, that Miltank. And you know, I was, oh, this is like freaking cow, ugly cow. It's like, that sounds terrible, by the way, but it's true. It's literally like, it was literally the bane of my existence and the bane of most of your existence as well. So I shared the pain with you guys for sure. But you know, it was a really good feeling after we finally beat her, and then how we basically make her cry, and then one of the other people in the gym will say, hey, you have to give me the badge, what the hell? So that was just insane. Other than that, I mean, of course, we got Morty on Ecruteak, and Cianwood, we had Chuck with the Poliwrath. We mentioned Jasmine already with Steelix. Another one that was a little difficult in the end, of course, gym number 8 in Blackthorn City with Claire, which is basically Baby Lance, which in this game would be the champion, and how you go through 3 Dragonairs that have a lot of like move coverage, and then you get into Kingdra. Kingdra being one of the Pokemon with fairly no weaknesses in this game, and you know, for being dual type Water and Dragon, which is one of the base type combinations in the game, by the way, it was just hard to deal with, especially with Dragon Breath paralyzing you every 5 seconds. I still feel like it wasn't as hard as Whitney. I think Claire beat me once, actually, come to think of it. And then I had to like retrain a little bit, had a bit of stunning moves here and there. And then that's how I was able to pass through her. So yeah, I mean, if I were to pick favorite gym leaders, I would say I like Jasmine. Claire, close second. And I like Morty too, because he had like the ghastly line, and I think that the Ghost Gym actually was really cool too. Of course, I'm not gonna mention the Kanto Gene Leaders that came right after, because that's probably like post game, so it's hard to compare. So I want to keep it Johto like, and it was a very nice variation of Gene Leaders, and then eventually Elite Four also was a good challenge as well. I feel like the Elite Four in this game wasn't as hard as the one from Kanto though, especially because I think they are lower level as well. So definitely, I think we're trying to make it a little bit more balanced and try to cover for those. But yeah, I mean, overall, just this region overall is like, it's also one of my favorites too. I feel like that the distribution and how you explore it, and so many memorable locations as well that will translate again into the connection between Johto and Kanto, made it really, really special. And let's face it, I mean, this region is just special for the fact that connects to Kanto, so you can go back and forward. So we can look at it as the big region composed out of two. And again, I don't think like there's any other games that I will remember the most other than this ones, and it's because of that exact same fact. And while we're at it, let's talk about the new features that really, really, really shaked up things and changed the game for good. And of course, we already briefly mentioned one, which is the day-night cycle. I mean, this by itself, it was just groundbreaking. I mean, we saw it first with Ocarina of Time being released in 1998 for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, at least for myself. That's how I saw it. I don't know if any other games implemented first. That's the only one I can remember. But then, how would you were able to pull this off on a Game Boy? And I might just retitle the episode, how did they do it? Because it's just everything that was done in this game was really, really groundbreaking for where it was made, because on a like 8-bit 16-bit cartridge. I might be off with the bit size, but you guys know what I mean. But yeah, I mean, and how this really, like I said, it increased the sense of engagement in the game, because the fact that you would need to play on certain times of the day, because Pokemon will appear on specific times, and just the in-game clock will affect your gameplay in general. There were locations and localities that you could not access up until either in the morning or at night, or things would close and then you would need to go back in the morning, like normal day. I feel like besides adding like replayability features and keep you engaged in certain times of the day, it would also encourage the player, because in the end of the day, I'm sure like Nintendo always looks after their gamers, and you don't want to spend all day playing and stuck into the console. So sometimes, if there's something I need to wait until the morning, then hey, game over. I have to turn off the device, go to sleep, and try again the next day. So I feel like that was really, really revolutionary, and really, like I said, it increased the sense of engagement and like reality. Like you feel like this game was like part of your day-to-day basis, and they really nailed on that matter. Other things that were introduced for the first time was the breeding and eggs mechanic, and this actually was inspired of the fact that we mentioned briefly about in the anime how Misty got her Togepi, which was hatched from the egg, and this game actually introduced the eggs mechanic, and how it added this whole layer to depth in the game, especially when it come down to completing the decks. Because on this generation, we got a lot of like the baby Pokemon pre-evolutions. We got Pichu, we got the Elekid, we got Magby, Smoshum, and how most of the only ways that you can get these Pokemon is by using the breeding mechanic and finding either two Pokemon of the opposite sex on the same species, or a Ditto. Which, funny enough, that was really cool to discover when you can do things with Ditto, and it would make sense. It would just transform into the other opposite Pokemon. And, the fact that you would get the egg from the daycare, and then you would need to actually walk around back and forward until it eventually hatch. Again, sense of immersion and replayability. And they really, really nailed this out. And how this really, really like shake things up, because eventually I don't know how far in where the whole like IVs EVs mechanic here, I don't think they were as I think they're starting to introduce them, but it weren't as depth as it is nowadays. But like how different like breeding combinations with different Pokemon types that were on the same egg group would like give you access to new moves, and like, you know, and it was just the sense of discovery in this game never ends, and that's what I love about it. Especially when you start getting into the nitty-gritty of things and you start to understand a little bit battling and like how these things affect battle and leveling and how strong your Pokemon is. It's just really, really great. Of course, we got the held items and berries, which were introduced. We had items before, which was more of like the potions and like your healing status that were just used in battle. But now our Pokemon can carry an item, and the items will have a certain effect on the Pokemon. It could be either than healing, that with what the berries were in the first place, or it could affect moves or increase their powers. You know, we have items like the Mystic Water and the Soft Sand that will increase like water and ground moves respectively. And how even we needed items now, new items other than the stones that will trigger evolutions. Like, for example, like how my favorite Pokemon, one of my favorite Pokemons in the game, which is Scizor, you needed to trade a Zyder with a metal coat, and then he will get his evolution. Sad enough, you needed another person in order to make that happen, but you know, the fact that they introduced these kind of things, this is where the evolution methods like really went nuts. From this point forward, I mean, today we have freaking Inkay. Like, how can you, first of all, parenthesis here, how are you able to even guess that you will need to turn your DS upside down to evolve Inkay into Malamar? Like, how is that even, how? I want to hear from somebody who genuinely discovered that by themselves, by not looking into any guides or looking at any ads or magazines, because that for me is crazy. Please tell me in the comments if you figured out the Inkay Malamar situation. But anyway, back to Generation 2. You know, popular items were introduced in this game. I mean, we have the Leftovers, which was a game changer when battling, which will restore your Pokemon's health little by little in battle. And you know, which at the time, you know, with right now so many items that can like counter it, it was so broken back in the day because it would heal you like really good, especially if you have a Pokemon with a high defense. That item was pretty much a deal breaker when it comes down to battling. And you know, it's just how they added a little bit of a strategy into the game, and then you will think, okay, if he holds a berry, then he can take a little bit of extra hit, or if I do the black belt, then it's gonna hit harder, especially if it's a physical attacker. So it really like shake things up battling wise. And of course, there was the introduction to what it became a cult of following and a whole like different like game changer thing, which is the introduction to shiny Pokemon, and you got the introduction to this when finding the shiny Gyarados on the Lake of Rage. And you know, again, one of the coolest shinies in the game, Red Gyarados, just looks badass as heck. And the fact that then you are told that you can find any other Pokemon in like a slightly different color, especially with the little chime that said "Drrrring," so you know it's shiny. And I believe my first shiny Pokemon that I found in the game was Hoot Hoot, just like Ash on the anime. So it was cool to have my shiny Hoot Hoot, eventually my gold shiny Noctowl. And then I think I found an Unknown, if I'm not mistaken, while hunting for the Unknown, the letters of the Unknowns. I found those two, and it was really cool. It was really cool because he added like another type of gameplay to the game. Then you'll see people that were trying to shiny hunt. The term shiny hunt was born, and they would just complete the decks with only shiny Pokemon, and I think that was awesome. Finally, of course, the elephant in the room, which was the revelation of 2 regions. And you know, the fact that you start playing in Johto and go through all the gyms, and then when you're trying to reach the Pokemon League, you just go on the water area right next to your house in Newbark, and once you reach out to the other side, you have this greeting of, you know what you just did, right? You just stepped on Kanto, which, by the way, I mean, we didn't know exactly what the first region of Generation 1 was called, so I guess this is like the first time they actually give it a name as the name of Kanto. I don't recall if this even is acknowledged on any of the manuals of the previous games, Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, but just having that revelation alone and looking at the Pokegear with the map, and then you find yourself in Kanto. More so that instead of like trying to beat the Pokemon League, you just wanted to go back in Kanto and visit all the previous towns from the previous game to see how much they have changed and what's different about them. And you know, then you get the final surprise once you beat the Elite Four and the Pokemon League, and then you're able to actually travel to Kanto. And you know, like they said, the true test then begins. But we're gonna leave that for the next section. And now, of course, we're gonna move to what, you know, pretty much is the climax of the game, both the legendary encounters and the post game, basically, after you go through the Elite Four, beat the champion, and then face yourself to another challenge, which is revisiting Kanto. But to briefly mention, of course, this was one of the first games, if not the first games, that the box art now, it won't consist of the starter, which Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow did. And Green, I should say. Green just released in Japan, so sorry if I go back and forward. But we got our first legendary box art, which for Gold was Ho-Oh, and for Lugia was for Pokemon Silver. And of course, I got Gold, so Ho-Oh, I mean, it's my favorite. Although I do appreciate Lugia because of the Pokemon 2000 movie and how confused we were at first, because we didn't know if it was like a fourth legendary bird based on water. And but it has just ended up being Lugia is basically like quote unquote the father of the legendary birds. So as Ho-Oh is the quote unquote father of the legendary dogs, which are in cats actually. So but anyway, they're called the legendary dogs. And you know, to briefly mention the legendaries of this game, you know, starting with the legendary beast, let's call it the right way, Reiku, Entei, and Zuikun. And then thinking that Suicune got his own game in the end with the iteration on Pokemon Crystal. Can I just say that these actually, I don't know, I can find myself going back and forward. I think I like the dogs a little better than the birds, just because they're more interesting, especially the fact that you find them in the, I think it's in the Burn Tower, at the bottom of the Burn Tower, and then you start roaming all across Johto. I don't think they're going to Kanto. I think they're just in Johto. And you know, sometimes you don't have idea, because when you find them, you just hear their cry and then you just run away, and you think that's all of it. And then suddenly you just go in training or on a patch of grass, and you see this freaking electric lion appearing, and then you start freaking out and you think it's like a Pokemon on the region. Then the moment you try to catch them or try to make a move, of course, they are over level. I think they're level 40, if I'm not mistaken, when you encounter. But they just keep fleeing, and you'll see them roaming all across the map. And try to chase them down, learn their pattern, if they have any. I'm not sure if they have any patterns per se, but it was just very, very fun to chase them down and eventually catching them once you try to figure out what to do. You know, you just need to paralyze them or use Mean Look of them, try to outspeed them. I guess Gengar would be the best bet for that in Generation 2. But it was really cool to just have them like chase, and instead of being on a specific spot, you were just going all across the region to see if you get the chance to encounter it, which is crazy. And going back to the box legendaries, I mean, my favorite one has to be Ho-Oh, of course. I mean, of course, might be a little biased because of the game that I got, but also we also see Ho-Oh in the first episode of Pokemon the anime right at the end, and I'm pretty sure everybody is very familiar with the scene I'm talking about, because Ash trying to like read the text, and he says that, hey, I don't know this guy, not all Pokemon have been discovered yet. And we got our first teaser of Pokemon Gold and Silver and Crystal right even before it was even being made. I mean, it probably was made and the games were released by then, but you guys know what I mean. And you know how you like face him off on the top of the Twin Tower, and then Lugia on the Seaside Cave, I think it's called. I gotta say, I think Ho-Ho it's a little more interesting, especially his theme song that they added like later on. It was even more interesting as well. I barely remember Lugia's, and it was really nice. And you know, with the whole like Sacred Fire attack, which looked really cool back in the day. That's the best one. That's the better one. I mean, Lugia's Aeroblast also, I remember very well. Mostly because Pokemon Stadium, it has this very sick-ass animation too. So I guess credits for both. They're really good box legendaries, and they really, really supplement the whole game. And then after you capture them, move on to the Pokemon League, and then we face ourselves with the Elite Four. Sleep 4, which also it's very interesting to see like how we have a returning Elite Four member, which being Bruno, now with his Generation 2 team, including Hitmontop, which then you realize that Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee had like a third brother, and not only that they have a pre-evolution with Tyrogue, which was introduced in this game. And I'm telling you, this is what we mentioned before. This is how the evolution methods go crazy, because to get Hitmontop, you have to have the same level of attack and defense in order for them to evolve into Hitmontop, which is very hard to do. And you basically need to try playing with iron and protein so you can try like match them even, and praying that when you level up, Tyrogue doesn't overlap one or the other. But it was very interesting. And then of course we see another returning member, well, not member exactly, but it was a gym leader. He got promoted to Elite Four, which is Koga. Koga now is the second battle at the Elite Four with a very nice upgraded team, including Crobat, which is also one of my favorite Pokemon Generation 2. I think it's really cool that Golbat got that evolution. And then of course we have Will, which is a psychic type Pokemon. Although intimidating, I don't think it was as hard as Sabrina was back in the previous generation. I mean, more so because now we have a counter for the psychic type, which is the dark type. And then finally we have Karen, which is specialized in dark type Pokemon, although two of their Pokemon are poison, so it doesn't make sense. But then this is what we got our introduction to my favorite Pokemon, which is Umbreon. I have a little Umbreon plushies here next to me. I love Umbreon. I think it's a really, really super cool design. Sort of edgy, but at the same time charming. I don't know how to explain it, but I love Umbreon. I always love Umbreon. I think that's the best evolution. It might not be the most versatile of all of them, but it's definitely one of the best designs in, I would say, like in the entire franchise, even up to this day. And then, of course, we have our champion, Lance, which he has his upgraded team of dragons, including a Gyarados and a Charizard this time around. And 3 Dragonites instead of having 2 Dragonites. I think it was 2 Dragonites, and then they were all Dragonairs or Dragon. I don't remember Generation 1, but really cool battle nonetheless. Definitely bring your Ice-type Pokemon if you have one to counter. And, of course, in the end of the day, we'll be having... Once we get our title, then we get to run to Kanto finally, and just to discover that not only you can travel to Kanto, visit all localities, you can also challenge the gym leaders again. So it's like a whole different thing now. So you have more 8 badges to run. They're all scaled up, so it's not like you are gonna be necessarily overpowered. So it's gonna be almost even. Just think about it as more of a Elite Four Part 2 times 8, basically. And then eventually, once you get all of the badges from Kanto, you get a message from, I think it's Professor Oak, that somebody is waiting for you in the top of Mount Silver. Then you make your way to all Mount Silver, try to go through all these overpowered Pokemon that you can find there to reach the peak. And this is how really everything comes to full circle, because your last opponent in the entire game is none other than Red himself, your avatar that you controlled and played as in Pokemon Red, Blue, Green, and Yellow. And how you see how their Pikachu is the first thing that he sent. He's level what, 70 something or 80 something, and you could be way under level by this time of the game still. So get ready. Has all the starters, has Lapras. From the top of my head, And it was really cool, especially in the fact that he doesn't speak. I mean, I guess they just took that approach, of course. And once you beat him, you just roll up the credits, and then that's it. It's like basically you reach the peak of the game there. And when I tell you peak, it's literally you're in the peak of the Mount Silver, and you're in the peak of the game, because that is the thing. And again, another huge surprise that not any other games can pull off like Pokemon Gold and Silver did. And you know, to add more things to the mix, of course, this is where the legacy of this game comes to be, and why Generation 2 remains so much timeless up until this day. And you know, even 2 decades later, 2.5 decades later, you can see that this is like, and I said this, and I know I sound like a broken record, is the perfect mix of nostalgia, because of the fact that we still have access to the original region, and innovation for bringing so many things to the table, new places to explore. Of course, more importantly too, the introduction of 2 more types, which is the dark type and the steel type, which were huge game changers, and they were much needed additions, especially after you realize how much dragon and psychic were so way overpowered in Generation 1. So they definitely needed a counter to do that. So, and of course, with the introduction of the items and the day and night cycle, and all the things we talk about on the new pictures, and how this is just was exponentially better with the introduction of these games. And you know, of course, we have to mention that, you know, if anything is so good, it has to be remade. And of course, we got the remakes of these games with Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver, which up until this day, based on the popular audience, they remain to being the best remakes of any Pokemon game so far. And you know, the best, like let's say, refresh of any game franchise in general. What they did with Heart Gold and Soul and Silver, it's just incredible. And it really stands out how they just grab all the things good about Gold and Silver and Crystal, and they made it exponentially better, and added like even new features and more quality of life improvements that made this even more so special. Although I really love Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and how on the new additions, you know, of course, with the new improvements that they did on the previous generations before, you know, I think they came out when Diamond and Pearl came out, so it was like that same gen. So we got a mixed up of both generations there. New Pokemon, new moveset, different ways to approach things now, but still at its core was still Pokemon Gold and Silver. However, I will say I have a very special place in my heart for the classics, the original ones. So I always gonna go to the original games when I want to replay them, but I might get the itch. I'm currently playing through Gold one more time, and I might just pick up Heart Gold now that we're able to do it on the phone. So definitely gonna check out Heart Gold after I finish the Gold run first. And you know, maybe my opinion might change, but I'm always gonna come back, because when I think of Pokemon Gold and Silver, I was gonna think of the Generation 2 specifically, and I'm sure more of you guys think the same way. And like I said before, I love these games, and I don't think ever since these games came out, no Pokemon game has reached out that level of excitement and just excitement, hype, happiness that this really grabbed my attention upon too, especially because I remember it so well, and remember my emotions very well with this game. And you know, it just brings back a flood of memories. Even now when I'm replaying it, I was getting to all the main locations, and you know, trying to get into the legendary beasts, or climbing the tower to get to Ho-Ho, or like stepping in Kanto again. It just takes me back specifically to that memory. And it's really good when you pick something back out that means so much to you, and it just immediately transports you to that same era and relive some of those memories. Hey, listen, you might need to jack up the memory a little bit, and you might remember things that you didn't remember before because of this. So, you know, it's always good to go back every so often and reminiscent of your life and what have you learned from it since then. This is turning into a TED Talk now, but it's what this game is, and it's very special. And if there's another remake of this game on modern settings, I really hope that they really take their lesson. I mean, I'll take Pokemon Legends Johto at this point. So if that comes down the line, I'll be so happy, because he will be in my favorite setting Pokemon ever, with my favorite Pokemons and everything in between. And of course, all that Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal did, it can be reflected nowadays. I mean, exploration, growth, connections with your favorite mons, and like how do you interact with them, how do you create your perfect mon, by the breeding method, and learning all these new like nitpicks and tricks to make the gaming experience even better. It all started with Pokemon Gold and Silver, and that's why these games will always be my favorites of all time. And that's gonna be the end of the episode, people. Thank you so much. Still cannot believe that it's been 24 years since I picked up my Game Boy Color and played this game for the first time. And what a wild ride it was. And I want to thank everybody who stick around up until this point and listen. I'm sure you guys share similar experiences with me if you made it this far. So I really appreciate every single one of you that do. And to close a little bit of the arguments here, of course, real quick, favorite Pokemons of the generation. Umbreon, number 1. Scizor, number 2. I really like Kingdra, Steelix, Hitmontop, I think is pretty cool. I do like Totodile, of course, my favorite starter. Crobat as evolution of Golbat, I think is really cool, especially because it's super freaking fast. And yeah, I mean, those are the ones from the top of my head that I truly enjoy. Favorite gym leader, let's see. Who do we like? We like Jasmine because of Steelix. I also like Morty because of the ghost type Pokemon. I think that battle was really fun, and the introduction of Shadow Ball was actually really freaking cool. It's pretty much like the counter of Psychic. And of course Claire, because it was really cool how she was like the tamer of the dragons, and then she had the 3 Dragonets and leads up onto Kindra, which is a really good Pokemon with barely any weakness at all, at least by generation 2. Traumas, Whitney, of course, and his freaking Miltank. Yes, to nowadays, of course, we know how to play the game, so it's easier to deal with, but it's definitely a challenge every time, no matter how experienced or unexperienced you are with these games. And my favorite town, I want to say, like I said, Goldenrod City. And favorite locality, National Park, because I feel like it has one of the best themes in the entire game. And really briefly, I mentioned before, the music of this game was a step up in the right direction. We got a lot of cool themes that we remember. National Park is very popular, myself included. I love that thing. I think it's very calming, but Goldenrod City is definitely one that comes back into my mind more often when I think about this game. But yeah, I mean, Pokemon is known for amazing music, and this game is no exception, and it only keeps getting better and better with the later iterations. But yeah, guys, that's gonna be the end. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. The holidays are approaching. I hope you guys are getting ready to get your presents and show love and appreciation to your loved ones. We are getting near the end of season 1. We have maybe 1 or 2 episodes left. So please stay tuned as we're going to close the season on a bang. And then I kind of wait for next year for you guys to see what I have prepared for all of you. So if you guys have enjoyed the ride with Game and Chat, thank you so much again. Of course, feel free to catch up. We are 14 episodes in, so there's definitely, if you miss one, that was the opportunity to catch up. You guys know where to go. You guys know where to find me already. Favorite podcast platform if you want to listen to the podcast. Social media, you find me on Instagram. You find me on Blue Sky. You find me on X, although it's going to be less active there. So definitely Instagram and Blue Sky if you want to get a little bit more updates on what's going on. And of course, if you want the live experience of 1-2 Switcheroo, check out my Twitch channel, which will soon come back with regular streaming schedule. So please stay tuned for that. I'm really looking forward to hear and read all of you on the Twitch chat. For everybody else, thank you so much for listening, everybody. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. This is Daniel, aka One to Switcheroo, signing off. Game on.